Well, hello everyone. I am really excited to introduce my friend my friend Travers. I can talk. I'm excited to introduce Travers tonight, who is just incredible. I forget how long we've known each other for now. I feel like it's been at least a few years, but
I can't,
I'm
I honestly, it feels like forever.
yeah, but in a good
I
way.
literally can't remember when I met you. That's how
Yeah.
long it seems. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but not in a bad
definitely,
way.
yeah, in a right, in all the best ways. Yeah. So
Yes. So Travers, he, him pronouns is based out of Austin, Texas. He is the founder and CEO of Queerency, which is a wonderful source of news for the queer economy, especially for LGBTQ plus folks, just to follow and learn about new businesses and things like that. He's also the creator of LGBTQ Business Week, which I've had the honor and privilege of being able to participate in various ways, and that'll be coming up again this year, and I'm sure you'll give a nod to it, knowing you, to have a chance to shout that out. But he's an award-winning content strategist, social media storytelling expert, an editor with 15 years of experience in digital media, digital marketing, and book publishing. He's a Forbes contributor who covers different topics. I was in one of the articles. I was excited about that. Thank you, friend. But he's also worked with just leading companies, including MailChimp and Random House and Scholastic and all sorts of big companies. So I'm sure you'll cover a lot more about yourself and the work that you do, so I won't go on forever about it. But basically, Travers is awesome. He's doing awesome things, and I'm really grateful that he's here tonight. So, Travers, I will now be quiet and give you the full floor. So, thank you again for being here. And again, as a reminder to folks, we will stop recording and have folks come back on when we're ready for the Q&A part.
thank you so much, Charlie. That's such a kind introduction, and I'm just so grateful to you and to P Flag Los Angeles for inviting me to speak to you tonight. This is an honor. I'm such a fan and just so grateful of the work that P Flag Los Angeles does and that P Flag chapters across the country do. And I'm happy to be here. So. Today or this evening, I'm going to be talking about entrepreneurship as activism, the power of LGBTQ owned businesses. And as Charlie mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Queerency. We're the leading source for LGBTQ plus business and financial news. I launched it in 2020 because I didn't see any consistent reporting on LGBTQ entrepreneurship, queer innovation, and just the queer economy from either the mainstream business media or LGBTQ general interest media. So I went out on a limb, started Queerency, and we've grown to reach 1 million people across all of our channels per month. And so before I tell you more about entrepreneurship as activism, first, I'd like to tell you a bit more about myself and my journey in entrepreneurship. So, as Charlie mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Queerency, the creator of LGBTQ plus Business Week. Excited to tell you more about that later. And, all of these other fancy sounding things on the screen that you see here now. And entrepreneurship has really afforded me a lot of those opportunities. But before all of these great things, I was a just out of college, young professional who was absolutely struggling and was terrified because I had just come out as gay and I was both explicitly and implicitly told that I was throwing away all of my career opportunities, any hopes that I had for making it in business as an entrepreneur, because it was going to be hard enough to make it in business as a Black person, but to be Black and queer in business was just going to be impossible. And for a while, I almost believed that, but that's because I didn't know things like Sirius XM Radio was founded by a trans woman, or that companies like PayPal, Facebook, and OpenAI have gay co-founders, or that a trans computer engineer pioneered smartphone technology. I had no clue that a Black gay millionaire helps fund the civil rights movement, or that a gay man is known as the father of computer science, or that some of the most impactful venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and beyond are Black lesbians. And I had absolutely no clue that there are more than 1.4 million LGBTQ entrepreneurs in the United States alone who contribute an estimated $1.7 trillion to our US economy every year. And the reason I didn't know that is because neither, like I said before, the mainstream media nor the LGBTQ general interest media were covering queer entrepreneurship and money matters with consistency, dignity, and depth. And so that's why I started Queerency. And over the past 4 years, I have learned so much about the queer entrepreneurship, LGBTQ economy topics. And when I think about LGBTQ small business owners, especially, there are four things that come to mind. LGBTQ plus small business owners are culture shapers, space makers, job creators, and barrier breakers. And um, a little further along in my presentation, I'll dig into these a bit more deeply with some case studies. But the first thing, but before we get into that, I wanted to like pause a bit on what we think of when we think of entrepreneurship. So like close your eyes, or if you don't have want you if you don't want to close your eyes, just think a bit about like when you hear the word entrepreneur, what are some of the words that come to mind? It may be profit, it may be capitalism, it may be you know, unfair, labor practices. Like a lot of times for some people, entrepreneurship could really just be about exploitation of uh, workers and of the capitalistic system in order to make a profit. Now let's think about activism, right? So when you think about activism, you often think of people who are driven by causes that are near and dear to themselves, to people they love, or to people they care about. And oftentimes, you don't think about money when it comes to activism, or the ways in which money can intersect and bolster activism. And so, one of the things that I have learned over my 4 years of interviewing, reporting on the queer economy, interviewing LGBTQ entrepreneurs, and just doing a lot of research on the ways in which a lot of LGBTQ businesses operate, we're so different than mainstream businesses in many ways because LGBTQ entrepreneurs often mix both the profit of entrepreneurship with the activism of advocacy related organizations. And that's where LGBTQ entrepreneurship as activism comes in. And so next, let's look at some case studies of how this works, both historically and in the modern day sense. So the first case study is a person I'm sure none of you have ever heard of, Harvey Milk. And obviously I'm kidding when I say that, but like what you may not have known about Harvey Milk was that before he was a groundbreaking politician, Harvey Milk was an entrepreneur. He was the owner of a camera and photography shop in the Castro of San Francisco called Castro Camera. And he actually was the founder and president of essentially the country's first LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. It was called the Castro Village Association. And that was created. He helped found that and became its president before he ran for office because non-LGBTQ business owners in the Castro neighborhood were trying to prevent him and other gay, lesbian, and other LGBTQ community members who were business owners from opening their businesses. So Harvey Milk is his even though we know of him as the great politician, we see the ways in which his entrepreneurship sort of laid the foundation for his political career. Another one that you may not have actually heard of is Norris B. Herndon. And this one is someone that I was like, I get chills when I think about him. So Norris B. Herndon was a closeted gay man who helped fund the civil rights movement. He was the wealthiest Black person, period, in the United States for much of the 20th century. He was the president of Atlanta Life Insurance, an insurance company that his father, Alonzo P. Herndon, founded at the turn of the 20th century in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And Alonzo P. Herndon was born into slavery. Norris B. Herndon took that company and turned it into what in today with inflation would be over a $500 million net worth. And by the time Alonzo died, or sorry, by the time Norris died, he had a net worth of hundreds of what would be hundreds of millions of dollars today. And so Norris B. Herndon was a donor to Martin Luther King, to the civil rights movement, to the Southern Christian, to the SCLC, to a lot of historically Black colleges and universities. And despite the fact that he was closeted, it was like an open secret. And so this is an example of someone who was extremely wealthy, was extremely pioneering due to both their race and their sexual orientation. And they used their wealth to make the world a better place. Next, in LA, you may be familiar with Jewel Tice Williams. She's best known as the founder of Jewel's Catch One in Los Angeles. And she was the first Black woman to own a nightclub in the United States. There was a documentary about her that was on Netflix a few years ago. And she's also known as an activist for LGBTQ rights. But the main point that I want to drive home about her entrepreneurial activism is that Catch One was a safe space before I think many of us even had the term, even knew what that term was. So it was a nightclub that was really built to serve Los Angeles Black queer community as a safe space. And this is a great example of how a business can not only be a place that makes money and employs people, but is also a third space, a safe space for many in the community. Here's another one that just always blows my mind. I think I'm gonna get t-shirts made that say Sirius XM Radio was founded by a trans woman. And that trans woman's name is Martine Rothblatt. So she founded Sirius XM Radio sold it, and then started a company called United Therapeutics because her daughter was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, which is a life-threatening, I believe, lung disease. And so after she sold Sirius XM, Martine Rothblatt went back to grad school to learn all that she could about pulmonary hypertension, started United Therapeutics, and not only built Sirius XM Radio, which is a $1 billion company, but then built United Therapeutics, which is another $1 billion company that builds artificial organs to help people with life-threatening diseases, just like her daughter. So, yet another example of a queer person who used business and entrepreneurship to solve problems that were affecting their loved ones. And in the case of United Therapeutics, countless other people who are benefiting from the products that they make. Now let's look at a modern version, or not even modern because not this is a modern. Martine Rocklet is modern too, but let's look at one of the most popular ones today. So Channing Nicholas is the founder of the astrology app called Channy. Channy is huge on social media. The app is a huge success. And Channy is uses, and forgive me, I can't remember what Channy's pronouns are, but Channy uses so I'm just going to use they use their social media presence to not only talk about astrology and horoscopes and zodiac signs, but they also use it to advocate for causes that they are that they feel deeply about, such as the plight of Palestinians in Gaza. Something else that I do want to really highlight, though, is that Channy is a great example of taking an disruptive approach, almost like an activist approach, to something as boring as benefits at work. So, Channy, the company, offers some really what shouldn't feel like revolutionary things, but in the current landscape, corporate landscape, they are some really great benefits that are rooted in really progressive um, philosophies. So they have a salary floor of $80,000, meaning no one at the company is paid less than $80,000. Fully covered health, dental, and vision, a 4-day work week. They offer unlimited menstrual leave for people with uteruses, unlimited and flexible paid vacation, 6 months paid parental leave, and you can just read the rest. But like for people who, struggle to get parental leave, struggle to or make a living wage, Channy is a great example of a queer, feminist tech and media company that is taking a very progressive approach to the ways in which they compensate and support their employees. So, before we wrap, I wanted to share some exciting news with you and to ask you to save the date for a couple of things that are really exciting that are happening later this year related to LGBTQ businesses. And they are LGBTQ plus Business Week, which is happening December 2nd through the 8th. That is a 7-day celebration of queer-owned small businesses across the country. And then I'm super excited, and this is an exclusive, to announce the first ever Queerency Con, which is happening December 6th through the 8th in Austin, Texas. So it's going to be an in-person wrap up of LGBTQ plus Business Week. And it's going to be an opportunity to learn more about how to grow your business and prepare for success, both financially and otherwise, in 2025. So here are the takeaways about entrepreneurship as activism. The first thing that I really like you to remember is that for many LGBTQ entrepreneurs, it's not just profit and it's not just impact, it's both, right? So, um, with many for-profit businesses, all they're thinking about is the bottom line. With many nonprofit businesses, all they're thinking about is social impact. But with many queer-owned businesses that look at entrepreneurship as a form of activism or advocacy, they mix the two, and that's really awesome. The next is that entrepreneurial activism can be seen in corporate disruption. So the example of like Channy and those amazing benefits that they provide for their employees. That's a great way to think of entrepreneurship and using your role as a job creator and a business owner to not only pay people a living wage, but make their entire lives better. The third is that activism through entrepreneurship does not look a certain way, right? So for Norris B. Herndon, that meant funding the civil rights, using his millions of dollars to fund the civil rights movement. For Harvey Milk, that meant organizing other business owners to create the Castro Village Association. For Jewel Tice Williams, that meant creating a safe space for people in her community. For Martine Rothblatt, that meant literally building a company and products to save people's lives. And for Channing Nicholas, that means speaking out on causes that are near and dear to their heart and creating a non-toxic work environment for their employees. So activism does not have to look like marching or protesting. You can really advocate for the causes that matter the most to you in many different ways. And finally, entrepreneurial activism in queer communities is always community focused, right? That's the one thing that ties all of these examples together is their focus on their communities, whatever their communities were. And so that is something that is really not unique, but foundational to LGBTQ small business owners. And it makes me even prouder to be a part of this community. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak and to share this presentation with you. I'd love to keep in touch. Feel free to follow me and Queerency on social media. We're just at Queerency. And you can also email me at travers@queerency.com. And I appreciate your time and am happy to answer any questions or to discuss anything with you.
Travers, thank you so much. Before I hit stop on recording, there were a few things that like sort of came up for me as you were talking that I just wanted to maybe have a cute little chat about. Um, First was, when you were starting your presentation at the top, mentioning some facts about LGBTQ plus pioneers and impacts they've had and continue to have on our world today, like tech contributions. There are so many folks, right, who want to argue that being gay, and I'm going to use heavy air quotes there, shouldn't be taught in schools. And I'm curious if like I know like some of these folks I think you had to more intentionally seek out and to get more information on. I'm curious how accessible that was to you and if you ever heard about any of them throughout your academic career.
Um, that's a great question. Many of these, so to answer your second question first, no, I had never heard of most of these people, except for Harvey Milk, of course, right? But that was only because he's Harvey Milk. And even then, I think it's primarily because of the movie that was made about him when I was, I guess, in high school, maybe. And so, other than other than Harvey Milk, no, I had never heard of any of these people. Not in high school, not in college. I mean, I was a grown adult before any of these people. Um, before I came across any of them, and I wouldn't say that it was hard to find out about them. It was just not none of I couldn't just like turn to like a book about LGBTQ entrepreneurship um throughout history, right? Or growing up, we would have like during like Black History Month, we would like my parents would always make it a point to like quiz me on Black history figures, and we would have like Black history flashcards and stuff like that. None of that existed for LGBTQ folks, right? And especially not for LGBTQ entrepreneurship. And so it wasn't that it was hard, it was just scattered, right? Like I would randomly read about you know, Martine Rothblatt. But it was only like it was never um celebrated in the way that like it deserved. Um, they would say, "Oh, the founder of SiriusXM Radio is Martine Rothblatt. By the way, she's trans," and then they would just keep going. I'm like, "What? Like that's huge, you know?" Had I known that SiriusXM Radio, something I've had a subscription for years, was founded by a trans woman, what would that have done had I known that earlier in my career? What artificial glass ceilings could I have like pushed through with that knowledge, right? Had I known that a Black gay man funded the civil rights movement, literally writing checks to Martin Luther King Jr. and literally funding historically Black colleges and universities. Had I known that when I was young, I wouldn't have had so much anxiety about coming out. I wouldn't have felt that it was going to be, I wouldn't have even listened when I was told that I wasn't going to be able to make it in business or entrepreneurship being Black and gay, because I would have had a like huge possibility model of that. And so, um, because that information was not readily accessible, that's why I started Queerency, and that's the role and the goal of the work that I do.
Yeah, this is going to be a little bit more of a stream of consciousness, but I promise there's a point that I will get to. When you were talking about Jules Catch One, and I loved that you specifically named third spaces. We are losing so many of those just because of the pandemic and that impact that it's continued to have on the economy, but also affordable, like third spaces that may be safer for folks so they can go meet new people and things like that.
Right.
Actually, in LA, Cuties was a coffee shop that existed. And when you were talking about how when there's like queer entrepreneurs, they tend to also infuse activism in that work. Cuties was exactly that. Um,
Mhm.
I might mess this up a little bit, but I believe they had like a pay what you can model because they didn't want to feel like anyone they couldn't just like come and not feel welcomed because we know LGBTQ plus folks can have so many different financial barriers for a million reasons, you know, and so they were doing things like that and really disrupting. And unfortunately, they did have to close their physical doors to the coffee and espresso shop early pandemic days, but they continue to do their work. They continue to do really amazing events, both online and in person, especially throughout LA. So I guess I just wanted to I don't know, it just like what you were talking about made me also think about that. So, um, yeah, I don't think there's really a question there other than just like continuing to reinforce like what you had already mentioned throughout your presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many examples. I thought about cuties when I was doing my presentation. There are just so many. We could be here for like hours if you look at all of the companies like that are open today that are doing things from a very activist, advocacy focused lens and mixing that with entrepreneurship. And Cuties is absolutely one of them.